Loki Season 2 is over with episode 6, and it looks like the MCU's best series has officially ended, because I have no idea how they continue this show after the end of this one, because I feel like it wraps up everything perfectly and puts Loki in a new spot in the MCU. And I feel like if we're going to take him out of that spot and put him back in the TVA, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of how this season ended. But who knows what the MCU will do with him now, because I definitely don't think this will be the last time we see him. It was a fantastic episode, diving deep into this version of Loki trying his hardest to be a hero and learning what his true destiny is. And it's to lose, because no matter what Lokis do, they always lose. So with that, let's dive into the breakdown and my different sections for the final episode of Loki. The main plot thread we need to start with is Loki's time slipping and how he's able to control it, because we know he time slips back to the moment before the loom explodes while Victor Timely is going down, which he stops to make sure Victor Timely doesn't die, and he does it over and over and over and over again, but Victor Timely just keeps dying, and nothing seems to be working. But I really like how they did that, because there's fun moments of Loki just getting frustrated, of trying stuff different and rushing Victor to try to get him down there before everything goes wrong, but he's never able to do it. Even a fun moment of him going to Miss Minutes to take Victor Timely out and asking for her help, which clearly doesn't go anywhere, because at that point in time, she was batshit crazy. And then we have him traveling even further back, going to the first time he brings Victor to meet Obi, rushes their introduction, brings out the diagram, and gets them all going really quickly to tell him the plan, cutting off Mobius before his joke, saying that it does look like him in a little suit, but it's not him, and just having a lot of fun moments of Loki just kind of pushing past everything we've already gone through so that he can try to rush to the loom and prevent everything from happening because they ran out of time. Even giving them a century to try to figure out how to fix it, and it's still not working. And it was cool when they finally did look like they succeeded, but it still failed, and the explanation Victor Timely gave made a lot of sense, because after they got the device in the loom, it looks like everything is fixed. The thing expands, but it can never expand to the amount of an infinite amount of timelines. There are so many infinite universes that there's no way a loom could fix itself to let it all through. There's just way too much, introducing and name dropping the multiverse, which I thought in this moment, this is when the MCU's multiverse was being born. And that's how everything was going to go, and we're going to go into the final this way. But in the end, everything's still unraveled, and it just kind of shows that the TVA is doomed to be destroyed. And I like how this gets Loki to go back in time even further, back to the moment before Sylvie kills He Who Remains. And I like how during this, some of the characters did kind of realize something weird was going on, but they just had no idea what was going on, because Loki just kept going back in time and then doing it again, and then doing it again, which just reset everything. Nevertheless, the part when we get to He Who Remains was really interesting, because it had Loki trying to stop Sylvie, and it just happened over and over and over again, just like how Victor Timely kept dying, because Loki was unable to stop Sylvie, because the only way to stop Sylvie from killing He Who Remains was to kill Sylvie, and there's no ways Loki was going to do that. And the only reason he tried to stop her was because that's what he thought would stop all the destruction, which it just kind of keeps pointing out that that's not how it's working. That's never going to stop anything. He Who Remains has to go, because if he doesn't go, then you still have one sacred timeline and a bunch of people still dying, and that's not worth it. And I thought it was interesting that He Who Remains noticed that Loki was time slipping, pointing out that he's like, well, how many times have you done this? You can't even stop time. Just making fun of Loki as he fails over and over again. So because they're in the end of time, he probably can see what's going on, and because it's He Who Remains, it seems like he planned for a lot of this. He even mentions while Sylvie is trying to kill him that he was never going to let Sylvie kill him. He was going to reincarnate. But then Loki pulls out the Uno reverse and is like, how do you know this isn't the first time we've had this conversation? Kind of like teasing that He Who Remains doesn't actually know what he's talking about, and Loki's the one with the upper hand, trying to outsmart the man at the end of time. But He Who Remains does know about Victor Timely, because he sent Miss Minutes to put Victor on that path to become him, and even knowing that they were having problems with the temporal loom and with it not being able to scale to the infinite amount of branches, even pointing out that there is no problem with the loom. The loom is a failsafe. If they don't prune the timelines, the loom just deletes everything that's not supposed to be there, because in the end, the TVA could always be rebuilt, and He Who Remains was never worried. It was just a last-ditch effort that if people stopped pruning timelines, that would just reset everything once again, showing that He Who Remained planned everything. He planned for Miss Minutes to go get Victor Timely, knowing that all these guys would fail if they tried to stop pruning timelines, and that would just all come back to him going back to the seat that he was supposed to be in. However, I don't think he accounted for Loki being like, screw that, I'm still going to destroy the loom. I'm going to make sure that you're not in charge of the TVA. And the one thing about this all too, I guess because the loom explodes, it seems to erase everything. One timeline stays. that He Who Remains can rebuild everything from the end of time. So I guess that's how it works. They never really explained it too much for that aspect because they kind of pushed past that for Loki to be the hero of this all. Found it really interesting that even though it's seeming like everything's getting unraveled and time's going haywire, it might be because everything gets reset in the end and they would have to do it all over again. Kind of like a time loop where they kill He Who Remains, the loom explodes, the timelines unravel, the He Who Remains comes back on top, he gets killed, timeline unravels, and again. But I love how Loki decides to say, screw it, breaks the loom, and doesn't really care that he's about to start a war. And I found it ironic that He Who Remains tries to say that all the peace Loki's experienced is because of him, trying to act like this hero that's been protecting the one timeline where, yeah, there might not be other Kang variants around being villains, but there's also still main big villains on this main timeline. So it's not just this Kang that's always a threat. We had Thanos literally snap everyone away, but he acts like he's this one hero keeping all the other Kangs away from him because they're such a big threat. But in the end, he just wanted to maintain his power. He didn't really care about anyone else except having that power to rule over everything. And I think Loki's choice in all of this matter was a big impact on his character, especially when he goes back in time even further to the moment he got into the TVA and was with Mobius during that interview when he was going to be shown his life and everything that happened during it that he was never going to experience because now he's a variant from that original timeline. And I love how he went to Mobius asking for his advice, asking for help, and how they pick who lives and who dies. And I like the story Mobius told him how you had these hunters going after a variant that was only an 8-year-old boy but would lead to 5,000 people dying. And in the end, Mobius was the hunter that was unable to kill this kid. And by pausing that short time caused a bunch of other branch timelines that ended up killing a bunch of other people because he was unable to act fast enough, showing that Renslayer, his partner, was the one that was able to take out the variant, and that's what made her become a judge. I thought it was really interesting, him pointing out that you got to keep the big picture in mind and that most purpose is more burden than glory, kind of setting up Loki for where he was going by the end of this episode, because you don't want to avoid it because you won't be able to live with it. Showing that if you try to avoid this burden that is destined upon you, you're going to regret everything because you're going to realize that that was the one thing you could do to save other people. And then when Loki thanks him and everything unravels, I was confused for a second. And then when Loki, I guess, went back to the future to see Sylvie to tell her about everything that just happened right before the end of last episode where everything unraveled, it gets very timey-wimey, a little confusing of how his time slipping works, but at least the moments we got were really well done with his character. Even trying to tell her that the only way for all this to survive is by killing her. Just Loki trying to figure out how to deal with all this, thinking that the burden that was going to be upon him was killing the person he loved, which in the end, he kind of realizes that that's not the case. I like how he tries to say that
it's the sacred timeline or nothing.
And Sylvie turning around and being like,
do you really want to be the god who takes away everyone's free will so you can protect that?
And then Loki being like,
but what good is free will if everyone's dead?
And who are you to say we can't die trying?
So two sides where one is trying to save some people's lives while the other one's like, no, we should give everyone the chance to survive. They should be able to choose their fate. If they want to fight to live, that's their choice rather than just letting them die because you only have one timeline to save. So I really like how this shows Loki where he was going, because Loki is in this kind of moment where he's trying to figure out what to do. He doesn't want to leave his friends. He doesn't want everyone to die, but he feels like the only way to save everyone is to do that prune timeline. After talking to Sylvie, he realizes that's not the right way to go and that he has to give people a choice to fight for what they believe in. So he goes back to the loom and goes to it himself, opening the blast doors, using his magic to seemingly hold back the explosion and letting the timelines unravel in front of him. And this is a great moment because while he's going through everything, he says,
I know what kind of god I need to be for you, for all of us.
Kind of calling back to the first Thor movie.
You could have done it, Father! For you! For all of us!
Kind of reminiscing about him trying to do something for everyone, but this time he's doing it the right way. And I like the new outfit he got, especially the horns. That was probably the coolest part out of all of it, but he got the Loki costume on, showing that him becoming something different, but still being Loki. And he had to be the hero. He had to be the one to save the multiverse by seemingly healing these branches that are dying in front of him while he's walking up these steps he's creating to this throne at the end of time and becoming the god of stories at the center of the multiverse. And this was awesome because it led to like a world tree. Just like how Asgard has the Asgardian world tree, the multiverse and timeline seem to have their own world tree now. And it looked awesome having Loki be at the center of it, looking like the hero he is. And because of him, the multiverse is saved and the TVA is also not destroyed, having all the different characters still running it, all his friends still being there, and he's able to watch over them as well. And I like how they had Miss Minutes come back. I honestly thought she was gonna be the biggest villain of the season, where she was gonna be like this big bad, but instead it looked like after she got rebooted, she went back to factory default as no longer as evil AI, at least for now. It's also great to hear that the TVA is going after the Kang variants, and that's now their goal. So I guess we're we're gonna have the TVA probably coming in for Kang Dynasty, because we know there's a bunch of Kang variants gathering up because of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and the TVA are also trying to stop them. Even mentioning that there was one on Earth 616 in an adjacent realm, but someone else took care of it, referencing Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, where they took care of that Kang. So that Kang that was in the quantum realm was on the TVA's radar after all the branched timelines came out, but instead an Avenger took care of it for them. And it was really nice to see each one of these characters kind of get their ending. Mobius is leaving the TVA and goes to the timeline where there is a version of him with his kids, kind of looking at his worst fear. He was worried that if he saw the life he could have had, and it was a good one, it would hurt a lot more than having a bad life that he escaped. So he got to see that life and what he could have had. It's kind of upsetting for him, but it was kind of nice that Sylvie was the one kind of being there for him, because it's a Loki variant, being there as a friend, and then just seeing how he's doing, and then goes off on her own way, which I wonder if we'll ever see her again. B-15 seems to be running everything and being the leader in the war room, and even telling Mobius that he has a place there with them if he ever decides to come back. OB makes a new manual with him and Victor Timely being the new ones to write the second edition. We get to see a young Victor Timely who's not given a TVA manual this time, so probably changing his future from being He Who Remains and being someone on his own. Renslayer wakes up in the void and seems to be taken out by Alioth. I feel like I pronounced that wrong, but oh well. And in the end of all things, Loki is the god of stories, and he watches over the multiverse. And now the one sad thing about this is that Loki's biggest fear was being alone, and it came true. To save the multiverse, to save his friends, he had to sacrifice himself and be alone, holding the multiverse together. And I thought that was really interesting for his character, because we've always seen him as pretty selfish, and he has developed over the years where now he's finally kind of figured out what he wanted. He figured out he didn't want the throne, but he didn't want to end up alone, and now he's got a throne and he's alone. So showing that he had to kind of give up what he wanted in order to save the people he cared about. Now that makes two Lokis that we've seen get a lot of character development, and I really wonder if we will see this version come back, and I feel like we probably will. Especially because Loki has now set up the MCU multiverse. Even though we've seen it in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and What If, this is the exact showing that the multiverse is born, which would lead into those movies. We know that the Kangs are coming back because of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, but the TVA confirms that they're going after and tracking these variants, most likely keeping an eye on them, and so that they don't cause any trouble. So I feel like they will probably come back during Kang Dynasty, because it makes sense, especially what they set up here. And it was cool to see how this story unfolded, because I feel like I said, this isn't the last time we're going to see Loki, the god of stories. I feel like we will also see him again in Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars, especially with what's going on, and most likely calling a group of Avengers to him to save the multiverse, kind of like how the Watcher did in What If with his multiverse Avengers. And in the end of everything, this is easily the best MCU series. It added so much to Loki as a character, and it actually had a proper ending where I don't think they need to make another season. It could just be the 2-season show, which ended just so well. But let me know, what did you think of the Loki series, the series final, and how everything played out during this? What do you think of Loki's destiny? Where do you think we're going to see him again? And were there any Easter eggs I might have missed? And what do you think about the few ones I noticed? I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my Marvel breakdowns. The next one coming out will be the Marvels, and I'm going to go see that today as this video is going up. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later when we watch another MCU project.